You're listening to Beyond Wellness Radio, bringing you the cutting edge in health, biohacking, and sports performance. Stay up to date and listen anywhere and anytime on your computer, tablet, or smartphone by subscribing on iTunes. Catch your host, Dr. Justin Marchegiani, as he answers your burning health questions as well as interviews from world-renowned guest experts. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.
Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani. Welcome to Beyond Wellness Radio. Feel free and head over to beyondwellnessradio.com where you can access our full podcast transcriptions. While you're there, you can also sign up for our thyroid and female hormone video series. This series goes into the root cause of why your hormones are out of balance. While you're there, you can also schedule a functional medicine consult with Dr. Justin, myself, where we'll dig deeper into the root cause of your health challenges. Feel free and think of sharing this podcast with at least one person. This podcast grows by people sharing it. Sharing is caring. If you can think of one person that can benefit from this information, please feel free and share it. If you're enjoying the podcast, make sure you subscribe on iTunes. You can also click below the video or podcast where you'll see the iTunes review button and leave us a review. You can also sign up for the newsletter at beyondwellnessradio.com where you'll get updates before anyone else. Thank you so much and enjoy the show.
Dr. Justin Marchegiani, welcome to the summit. How are you?
Evan, it's great, man. It's like deja vu all over again, right?
Isn't it? Isn't it? Well, cool. Well, tell people about what you do. You run a wellness clinic out of Austin, a worldwide functional medicine clinic. So tell people a little bit about yourself, how you got into this whole space. What led you to venture away from chiropractic and focus more on the science part of health and looking at hormones and adrenal lab tests and gut tests and all the things that you do?
Awesome. Well, off the bat, this is for the Adrenal Summit, the summit you are hosting. So any of my listeners that's listening to this on my podcast, Beyond Wellness Radio, feel free and head over to Evan's site, notjustpaleo.com, and sign up for his Adrenal Summit that he's doing with Dr. Alan Christensen. And then answering your question, so really functional medicine's evolved to the point now where virtual medicine's kind of taken over, and it's really convenient, number one, for the patient, because the patient doesn't have to drive back and forth to the doctor's office and inconvenience their day and then sitting around this bland office waiting to get, serviced and treated by the doctor with these quick visits that are typically happening in conventional medicine. We can have this kind of telemedicine kind of situation whether it's phone or Skype, and we can order all the lab work locally pretty much anywhere in the world. I mean, obviously domestic's better in the US, but we can still do it anywhere. And that's kind of changing medicine because we have the ability to check in with people on the diet and lifestyle side, create functional medicine programs, evaluate lab tests, and there's a level of convenience that's really nice, but also the ability to connect with someone so fast, face-to-face, to record calls, to have a lot of digital aspects to it with the website and a lot of the podcasts and videos supporting the healing, I think really makes it more convenient and easier to get better.
Makes sense. So you would argue you're almost not missing out on much. Maybe the physical touch element that you would have in clinic, but beyond that, there's really not anything that you're losing by working virtually.
Yeah, I mean, I would say a good physical exam is always great, but I mean, we can fret out a lot of that information in a good metabolic assessment or handout where we ask more in detail questions about skin and rashes and fingernail, ridging and such, and maybe hair quality or different energy things that we can fret out just with good metabolic questionnaires. But it's nice to be able to have a physical interaction. But all my patients, typically, they've already seen doctors recently anyway, so they've already been at least evaluated from a physical perspective. I mean, if someone's got a tumor in the back of their neck, right, and we're on Skype, may not be able to see that. So it's nice to get that kind of crossed off our list before we dig in.
Right. And that's something I noticed too. Most people have already been through a handful of doctors or specialists, so they've already had all of the baseline, the conventional stuff done that would pick up anything that would be alarming. So now we're looking deeper.
Yeah, and it's nice for us to dig in knowing that those conventional pathologies have been crossed off, because it really allows us to kind of really zone in super focused on what could be there on the functional side and not have to be as observant of the pathological situations, which typically they're more in your face anyway, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tell people a little bit about the compare and contrast between conventional medicine and the functional medicine approach. And if you want to use the context of adrenals or something else, then you can. I think that would be a good starting point.
Great. So overall in functional medicine, I give this comparison to my patients. Functional medicine and conventional medicine is like a light switch, okay? Functional medicine is the light switch that's the really cool dimmer switch. It can go off and on, and there's a spectrum. You can have it just a little bit on, you can have it in the middle, you can have it almost off, you can have it all the way on, right? So you have the ability to have various intervals of how high or how low that light is. Now with conventional medicine, the light's either off or on. In other words, if the light's on, you're healthy. If it's off, you're diseased, right? That's conventional medicine. Now, let's say the light's just a little bit flickering in the functional model, right? We got the dimmer switch, right? It's on just a little bit. Well, if you go to the conventional doctor, they're going to say, I see light, therefore you're fine. But on the functional spectrum, we say, yeah, we see light, but the light's kind of like 90% off, right? So let's work on ratcheting that dimmer switch up to 100%, 100% being 100% function. So conventional medicine, any bit of light, you're fine. You're normal. Hey, keep coming back. I'm going to write you a prescription for depression. If you're a female, maybe we'll recommend some birth control pills or both, right? That's typically the conventional medical solution. In functional medicine, we have the philosophical approach of the dimmer switch, so we can pretty much, no matter where you are on that light spectrum, work on ratcheting you up into the right direction.
Excellent analogy. Now, most people, what they do, for you and I both, something we've noticed is many people wait until they're ridden with health symptoms before they come to reach out and get help with functional medicine. But the analogy you used just proved something that I've been hoping for all along, which is that someone who is relatively healthy overall, maybe just has a couple of little kinks in their armor somewhere, they can still come and get help and feel new energy, or feel an increased sex drive, something that they've wanted, or feel less bloating, even though they are quote unquote okay by any other practitioner standard.
Correct. So can you reiterate that question one more time? I didn't quite get the full question.
Yeah, that was just a statement. That wasn't
okay, got it.
Yeah. So let's talk about adrenals. So this is one of the first steps that you do when you're working with patients is looking into the adrenals, which you and I both kind of break it down: adrenals, gut, detox, hormones, which is just so beautiful. Yeah. And I thank you for all the mentorship that you've provided to me. Even over this past year, every single week, we're digging in together. So I appreciate that.
No problem.
Now, let's talk about why adrenals have to be first in a functional medicine program. And then eventually we're going to talk about why most people are not getting results from that. But why can't you just go straight to the gut if someone has issues there? Why do you have to start at adrenals?
Great question. So I'm going to use my last patient that I had just before our call here as an example. And that's the nice thing about us and the podcast that we do and the summits that you're doing and then the interviews I do. We have a functional medicine clinical perspective that we bring to it. And that perspective allows people to not just have a theoretical kind of look into it, but actual, hey, what's working in the trenches? Because in the end, it's better to be coached by someone that's doing it than who's just doing it theoretically. So on that note, I just had a patient and we got some of her labs back in. We had a Dutch adrenal test with female hormones. We had a thyroid test, and we also had a gut test, 2 gut tests, an organic acid test that looked at bacterial function, as well as a GI map test and a DRG test. Now, on those tests, on the female hormone and the adrenal side, her adrenal hormone levels were okay. Like if we looked at how much amount of hormones she was pumping out, she's pretty good. The issues were very aberrant timing, very low in the morning, high in the afternoon, and very low at night. So there was this timing issue throughout the day, and that created mood swings and energy dips. Number 2, she had thyroid issues. So she had elevated TSH. She had very poor T4 levels and even poor T4 to T3 conversion. So there were thyroid issues. We need thyroid hormone to metabolize the building blocks to make hormones, i.e. cholesterol comes down the hormonal cascade. It gets acted upon by thyroid hormone to break it down into building blocks so it can actually be used to make some of these hormonal constituents. And last but not least, this woman's female hormones were very low. She's already postmenopausal, but she had very low estrogens, almost non-existent, very low progesterone, and very low DHEA. And so as a woman goes into menopause, the backup generator, so to speak, are the adrenals. And this is being the Adrenal Summit. This is important because the adrenals become this backup generator for sex hormone function once menopause hits and is through. So,
say that one more time. I think that's profound.
Yeah, so DHEA, one of the major building blocks, DHEA sulfate from the adrenals becomes this major building block for your sex hormones once the ovaries are in menopause. So it becomes the backup generator. So I always tell patients, imagine you get this generator, you spend a bunch of money on it, it's sitting in your garage or whatever, so when that storm comes, you can still have power, right? Now, most people want that generator 100% charged. That's the goal. So then when you plug it in, it works and everything is at 100% capacity. Like there's no lapse in function between the storm and being in the storm, so to speak. But now you got this generator. It's in the garage. It's 90% empty. So you got 10% of fuel capacity in there, and you're trying to get 100% function out of your house, right? You want the heat, you want the AC, you want everything to work. But that's not going to happen, or at least not for long, when the charge is that low. And that's like your adrenals being on low. So now instead of the storm or instead of the heat wave coming, now we got stress. We have family issues, financial issues, kid issues, job issues, up and down stressors that normally happen in life. They're like the thunderstorm or the heat wave that comes in stressing your house's electrical system. So supporting the adrenals really helps buffer out the hormones. And hormones aren't just to have babies, right? Hormones, they're there to reproduce, right? Have a child, but also reproduce you, meaning every cell in the body, hair, skin, nails, muscle, tissue, bones, all of these important things as you get older become more important, because who doesn't want to have healthy skin, healthy nails, have decreased chance of being osteoporotic, having weak bones, weak muscles. Everyone as they age wants to age as gracefully as possible, and having strong adrenals is paramount to that goal.
Excellent. So talk about this female. People want to know, well, what does this feel like? You mentioned some geeky lab results here. What does that actually translate to? What would this person be? How would they be going through their day?
Oh, great question. So especially women with the sex hormones, because women have that drop, right? They're cycling, now they're not cycling. It typically takes a year or so to make that transition. So now they're not cycling. One of the big first issues we're going to see are hot flashes, right? Typically FSH starts to rise. That's the brain hormone that says to the ovaries, wake up, wake up. So FSH is trying to, wake them up, and that can start to create some hot flashes with the vasodilation. We can start feeling more moody. Right? Mood issues, irritability, even can see things like depression. Okay. I already mentioned depression, mood stuff. Sleep issues is a big one. We can start to see hair quality, skin quality issues, and also lower libido. So all those are all common symptoms, and also fatigue and brain fog.
Yeah. And
these hormones are antioxidants, right? So they help with stress and inflammation. So the more your hormones are off, the more inflammation can kind of be like a wildfire without a firefighter to put it in check, so to speak.
Yeah. And so you mentioned low cortisol. So she's probably waking up not feeling ready to start the day, maybe needing some caffeine, coffee, get going.
Exactly. And then also the swings in cortisol too, right? Remember, when we look at adrenal function, I think we'll get to this later when we dig into more lab assessment and lab testing. We not only look at adrenal levels, because this woman's levels, they weren't bad. They were actually in the middle of the range, but the rhythm piece wasn't good, and the sex hormone piece wasn't good. So when we look at adrenals, we have a three-pronged approach on how we assess it. Number one is going to be cortisol rhythm, because we have to recognize that when we look at adrenal issues, it's not just, oh, do you have adrenal fatigue or not? Right? It's how's the rhythm? How's the HPA axis, the brain, the HP, the hypothalamus pituitary talking to the adrenals? That's number one. Number two is how's the actual amount? What's the adrenals actually making? Is that enough to support function? And then number three, how's the sex hormone piece? So in this lady, rhythm wasn't good, amount was okay, but sex hormones were low. So she was missing 2 out of the 3. So she's going up to the plate with 2 strikes on her.
Wow. So let me ask you this. If you see normal adrenal output, so you see normal hormone levels,
yeah,
let's just say everything was normal, but it was dysfunctional. Do you call that adrenal dysfunction, or do you classify that adrenal fatigue?
Well, I don't like the word adrenal fatigue. I think adrenal fatigue can be a good way to describe people that have low sex hormones and very low cortisol, because that kind of can be called adrenal fatigue because everything's starting to become more depressed, which is good. The problem is a lot of people confuse adrenal fatigue and adrenal failure, maybe because there's 2 F's that start the words, I don't know. But adrenal failure is kind of like Addison's disease, right? That's more where there's an autoimmune attack on the adrenals, and the adrenals literally are barely functioning, and there's almost not enough cortisol to even get through daily requirements.
And how often have you actually seen that compared to what we typically work with, which is more adrenal dysfunction?
I've only seen one case of Addison's disease in my practice. which
And
is
this is
adrenal
among
failure.
Yeah, and this is among
Thousands of patients.
thousands of patients. So
Most people know when they have Addison's because they literally cannot get out of bed. I mean, if you go look back in the history books, cortisol was created, I think, synthetically or bioidentically in the 50s. And one of the major reasons why John F. Kennedy, JFK, won the presidential race in the 60s is he won the Senate in the mid-50s up in Massachusetts, where I'm from. And they had just found out a way to create cortisol. So he started taking it for his Addison's disease. And you can literally see his face and his muscles all start to fill out because he did not have enough cortisol. So if you look at pictures of him in the mid-50s or early 50s, he's absolutely gaunt. But then you look at him in the 60s during the presidential debates, he looks amazing. And part of that was that cortisol shift. And that's what happens when you have a cortisol failure. You literally you look terrible and you feel terrible.
Wow. Okay. So that's pretty rare overall for Addison. So typically somebody's going to be in that 99% range where you're having good cortisol or just completely horrible. Most people are existing somewhere between Cushing's, which is super high all the time, or Addison's where you can't make enough.
Yeah, it's the dimmer switch, right? So let's say off, that's Addison's. On, that's Cushing's, right? Right? Think Cush push, right? That's how we learned it in school. Cush push, it's high. Addison's is failure, okay? And most people, right, on is Cushing's, off is Addison's. Most people are on that dimmer switch somewhere in between.
So probably 99% of the people, and you and I have both had patients who have diagnosed themselves with Addison's, but then we look and it wouldn't be an Addison scenario. They've just been almost fear-mongered because when you look into the conventional research about adrenal fatigue or adrenal dysfunction, you're typically not going to find much. You're going to find WebMD's approach, which is Addison's or Cushing's. That's all you're going to read about. So this just goes to show the importance of the work that you're doing and the work that you and I do together, recording podcasts weekly, because we're seeing this stuff. It is real, and it's not in your head, and you're not crazy if you're dealing with these symptoms that you've discussed.
I 100% agree. Now, I like the word adrenal dysfunction because it kind of gives you a lot of latitude to address HPA axis stuff. Maybe the cortisol is not low. Maybe it's a rhythm issue. Maybe it's a sex hormone issue. I think adrenal fatigue can be more aptly described to be put on the label of like very low cortisol, very low sex hormones, all right? But people still conflate it with failure. So remember, adrenal fatigue is not adrenal failure, and a better word maybe be just adrenal dysfunction to look at it. And that really puts in the key issue that a lot of people are looking at. It becomes more of a brain issue than an adrenal issue, right? The HP, the brain's not talking to the adrenals. And then also, when we add in the gut issues, we know there's certain nutrients that are required to make the adrenals run optimally. Vitamin C, pantothenic acid, B5, zinc. And if we have digestive issues, which will eventually go there soon, that could be a driving factor of why the adrenals aren't running as well. And most people in adrenal land totally miss the gut piece of it.
Absolutely. Well, let's transition there now. That's basically phase 2, which is the gut. And many people, which you and I have kind of come up with an average, about 1 in 3 people have infections.
I'd say 1 in 2 to some degree. I mean, obviously, when we look at infections, there's a difference in severity. Let's say a bacterial overgrowth versus an dysbiosis or a full-on parasitic infection or a combo of all 3, right?
Right, which maybe we have a little bit of a biased population since we're working with people that have all these symptoms. So maybe the average person out there, but even if you look at like World Health Organization, they're saying that 20% or greater of the U.S. population has blastocystis hominis.
Yes, I know.
A common parasite. And this is something we see weekly at this point. So it's like, wow, a lot of people are going undiagnosed. And I'm sure that's kind of the lens that you wanted to start this topic on is people are going to quote unquote adrenal fatigue specialist or adrenal fatigue experts. We've seen some adrenal programs online, and typically the gut piece is ignored. Is that why people are suffering and not getting results?
That's a big part of it. So when we look at the symptom of fatigue, right, you have fatigue. Now, a lot of people, because of education in functional medicine, people are linking up fatigue as adrenals, right? I kind of have my fatigue triangle, right? In the top part of the fatigue triangle, we have the adrenals, because the adrenals help regulate glucocorticosteroid, aka cortisol, which helps regulate energy and inflammation. Most people are low energy and also inflamed, so it makes sense why their adrenals are in poor shape. So top part of the triangle is the adrenals. The bottom parts are going to be the thyroid and the mitochondria. Okay, the thyroid is there to help regulate metabolism. With low thyroid, we're not going to be able to have the building blocks to break down the healthy levels of cholesterol into building blocks to make hormones, number one. And thyroid controls temperature and resting metabolism. If you have a low resting temperature and metabolism, you're not going to be able to generate energy as well.
So let me ask you this too. How does Hashimoto's play into this too? Because this is something also that typically goes undiagnosed, autoimmune thyroid issues, where they've never been tested. They've never even had that looked at.
Yeah, great question. So Hashimoto's is going to hit the thyroid part of that triangle, but it really is a combination of all three, because when you have Hashimoto's, typically there's immune system upregulation where the immune system is attacking the thyroid gland. So that creates inflammation. So if we have inflammation, then guess what's in overdrive? The adrenals is in overdrive to help with the inflammation. The thyroids are being attacked by the immune system. So that means these various little follicles are being attacked by the immune cells. So they're bursting open and thyroid hormone goes up and it goes down. So early on, you can feel like you're on a roller coaster ride. You may even be diagnosed hyper to begin with. You may have anxiety and depression during the swings of thyroid hormone being released. So it can be this up and down roller coaster. And let's not forget, autoimmune conditions, typically there has to be some level of leaky gut happening. So we have leaky gut, whether it's from gluten exposure, various infections like Lyme or blasto or Yersinia enterocolitica or H. pylori. So you see how the gut starts to interplay with the adrenals and how the adrenals interplay with the thyroid and how the thyroid actually interplays back with the adrenals, because we need healthy levels of cortisol to help activate and convert thyroid hormone. So you can see if we have adrenal dysfunction, that can start to create thyroid issues too. And this patient I just saw, it was on Synthroid for 30 years. 150 microgram dose, which is equal to about 1.5 grams of Armour or Nature-Throid, which is a pretty hefty dose for someone that still has her thyroid, right? But she still had low levels of T4, very poor T4 to T3 conversion, and her TSH was still high. She's being medicated by an endocrinologist for 30 years. So we had to go in there and change that thyroid support a bit, support it a little bit more, but also fix the adrenals. And the big thing was fixing the gut, because she had a significant amount of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And we know the gut bacteria is really important with the enzyme sulfatase, which is produced by healthy gut bacteria to activate the T3 acetic acid and sulfate and activate thyroid hormone in the gut.
Wow, that's amazing. And so people that don't know, if you don't listen to my podcast or you don't listen to Justin's podcast already, I showed up with 2 parasite infections about a year ago. And Justin was the guy that told me. I went over to his house and I think we were just hanging out, or you were going to give me an adjustment or something.
Yeah.
And I said, Justin, help me. What's going on? I said, I've lost 25 pounds without trying. He took one glance at me and he goes, Evan, you got a parasite. And it hit me. And I was kind of like, yeah, I mean, maybe. And I put off testing. You were like, you need to go get your gut checked out. Go get a test. And I was like, okay. And so I finally got a hold of the lab. I said, I'll get a test kit. I ran it. I showed up with Cryptosporidium and Giardia, 2 parasites that are pretty bad. They're not the funnest parasites to have. And since working on those, I've been able to build more muscle. I've been able to gain more weight. When I ran my adrenals, I showed up with what I would consider adrenal dysfunction, if not adrenal fatigue. My cortisol was low all day. So that just goes to show that even a younger guy who was pretty active, I spent a lot of time outdoors. My diet is as close to 100% organic as possible. I still had adrenal issues, and I'm going to go ahead and say it was due to the stuff going on in the gut. What about you?
100%. I agree 100%. A lot of people that have adrenal issues, they miss the gut piece. And it's so hard because people are programmed to think of gut issues as diarrhea, bloating. Like, these are the symptoms that are associated with the gut issue. So when you start to tell someone that their fatigue could be from a gut issue, or their brain fog or their mood issues could be from a gut problem, they're like, it's so hard to get your head wrapped around that.
So basically what happens is, and not to put words in your mouth, you can elaborate as much as possible, but in these situations, you're getting robbed because you are feeding these bacterial overgrowths, you're feeding these yeast, you're feeding these parasites, and you're not feeding yourself. And myself, even today, looking at my fingernails, I do still have the vertical ridging, which that's not always a 100% indicator, but it told us there was some type of malabsorption going on. It was just a matter of getting the right testing done to figure out what was going on. So maybe we could, if you want to comment on that, and then we can talk about what tests need to be run for people to get an accurate diagnosis of what's going on.
So speaking clinically to your situation, there may still be another infection or two still lingering. So I know we're waiting to hear back on some of those retests. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with you. And it will be interesting to see how your fingernails change over time. Not to mention, this could be a long time coming too, right? So it may not just shift overnight. So we just got to keep an eye on it.
Yep.
And then go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you want to talk about the labs, and then do you want to reveal what you found on your labs?
Yeah, that'd be cool. I would just say one more thing here, because when we deal with fatigue and adrenal issues, I created this analogy because for me, it really just rings true. And analogies are great because you don't have to memorize. You just have to understand it, and it sticks, right? So that's why I like it. So my analogy is the adrenals. It's like, let's pretend you're in a car. It's a stick shift. It's a standard transmission, okay? So the adrenals are like your ability to shift gears, all right? Going from first gear to second gear to third gear. That's like your body's ability to handle more stress, right? The higher up in the gears you go, the faster your cars go and the more stress on the engine. Your ability to downshift is your body's ability to adapt to stress, to kind of get back to homeostasis or that parasympathetic rest and relax state. So the being able to shift gears up and down is being able to upregulate and downregulate to stress. That's number one. Number two, your resting metabolism. So if you put a car in neutral, you put it right in neutral, you could pull your foot off the clutch now. It won't stall it out. And typically you'll be at about 700 to 1,000 RPMs on average, okay? Now, that's like a good resting metabolism or resting RPM for the car. If you go too low, anyone that drives a stick knows their car will stall out, right? If you go too high, well, now you're putting extra stress on the car and it may burn out, may redline. So think of neutral as the resting metabolism of the engine. And then think of the mitochondria or the nutrients needed for the car to run as like the gasoline and the lubricants that are in the engine and in the gas tank that provide the fuel for the car to run. So on one hand, we have the ability to shift up and shift down as being able to deal with stress. The resting metabolism is kind of the thyroid piece. The nutrients required for the car to run, right, the substrate, the oil, the gas, etc., is the mitochondria. And then all that stuff feeds into the gut and feeds the detox pathways and feeds the brain. So when we have an issue with those three things, other things tend to be at root as well.
So it's all connected, and you can't just focus on one piece of the puzzle, because what's going to happen? You're going to come and maybe retest your hormones if you ever got them tested in the first place, and they're going to look probably the same, and your symptoms are still going to be there. Is that right?
Correct. 100%. Wow. And regarding my test, I just came back with an E. histo parasite, so I'm treating that as well. My wife actually came back with H. pylori and blasto, and this is her second time with blasto.
Wow.
So it's hard to say, where these things are coming from. And we water ski every week, and, you take a mouthful of water every now and then, so who knows, right? We also have some pets. We have our dog Butter, who's hanging out with me right now, and then a couple of cats, Misha and Dexter. And, they like to be friendly and stuff, so who knows, maybe we got some from them. But, you fix what you find. You get the testing done, you clear it out, because I think it's everyone's right to be infection-free, and we want to make sure that we have that opportunity.
Agreed. And I would consider you definitely one of the best, not just online, but in general, one of the best functional medicine practitioners out there that are actually looking at this stuff and not only helping people to be healthy, but doing it in a way that's fun. Now, this isn't a video interview for the summit side of things, but I'm looking at you here, and you smile the entire time. You love this stuff.
Love it, man. It's great. Well, the thing is, it's incredibly rewarding. I mean, I say that we have the best jobs in the world, because when you have patients come into your office that have really bounced around the conventional medical establishment for a while, they've maximized their options. And when you can help them get to the root cause of why they're feeling the way they're feeling, it's great. It's really exciting. It's like you're a CSI detective on TV. It's great.
I know. Does it ever hit you and kind of trip you out a little bit because this happened to me last week, when you are working with someone and they've been to 10 or 12 specialists, but yet they've never had some of these basic foundational functional medicine tests run?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people in functional medicine a lot of them may have a really big conventional medical background. So they look incredibly myopically at certain things under a functional medicine light. Like maybe they look at the adrenals and they're so myopic on the adrenals, but then they forget the gut, or they're looking at the gut, but they forget the thyroid, or they forget malabsorption pieces. So I think people, they don't have a good clinical hierarchy model of where to treat, and their lens is so focused on one thing. They're looking at the trees, but they're missing the forest, so to speak.
Right. And when I talked with Alan about this summit, I said, I basically want this to be the anti-summit summit, because a lot of these people that are in summits, the interviewees, are not clinicians. They may have some of these credentials, but they're typically not working with people. They're not in the trenches. And so I commend you for your work in the trenches on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. Not only that, working with people, but also putting out the content, because I think that really shows that you're putting in the effort and you're not just reading a book and then regurgitating something. Because something I've found is it doesn't matter how educated you are or how many letters you have after your name. If you've not been in the trenches, you cannot successfully get people better, because you don't understand the psychology that goes into this about people having to make the changes and being there as sort of a therapist as well to support them if there are any effects. Let's just say you're killing off an infection. You may feel a little bit worse before you feel a little bit better for the first couple of days, and being able to have the expertise to know that and forewarn them of it, it's priceless. So, people definitely check out Justin's site. It's justinhealth.com. And you can go look into the podcast. There's probably 100 episodes released by the time you listen to this. And I'm honored to be the co-host of that show for many of the episodes. And we have fun, just like we're doing here. So you can check them out there. Obviously, we could go on and on and on for hours, but I think you get the gist of it here is that you have to go check out his content, but two, you really have to look at this whole adrenal piece as a puzzle, but it's a puzzle that's solvable, right?
100%. And I appreciate your kind words there. And I think the big thing that we do on the podcast is we really bring that clinical experience, because, I have a lot of clinical friends and colleagues that have their head in the literature, the scientific literature, which I think is great. And maybe you can draw a lot of inferences from what to do next. But I think the best thing is, one, work on yourself. And then number two, observing how patients respond to and from different interventions and treatments is the absolute best learning experience for any doctor. I think having the clinical context before you go in is going to be important, because then you know where to put the different puzzle pieces to start, right? So that gives us the ability to kind of put it in the right order. And we're fortunate to have mentors like Dr. Kalish and Dr. Timmons when he was alive, regarding how and the best ways to treat people for success. So we all know that we try to avoid heavy metal stuff first, right? We try to avoid doing gut-killing stuff at first. We may even try to avoid detox stuff at first. Now, again, there are exceptions to all these rules, but that's the general trend in which we've worked on things. And the adrenals and the thyroid and the adrenals and the hormones tend to always be the first thing that we do. And it makes a big difference when you line it up in the right order. You could find the right things, but you put the puzzle pieces in the wrong order, the picture may not look as clear.
Absolutely. So if you're someone out there, and I'm sure you are, if you found this summit, who you've Googled your symptoms or you've looked on some paleo health blogs and you've read about some detox formula, or you've read about some cleanse or a gallbladder flush with olive oil, and there's just all sorts of crazy stuff out there. And a lot of people don't have a clear direction. Here's the clear direction if you've been looking for it, because I get goosebumps saying this, because it's been able to help my health. It's been able to help thousands of patients on your side of things, nearly 1,000 on my side of things. This is an approach that actually makes sense. You see that there's no dogma attached to it. Justin's telling it how it is and telling it to you straight. There's no fluff. There's no fancy words. If there are, they're broken down into analogies. This stuff can be very complicated. It is all tied together, but at the end of the day, it comes down to some simple takeaways. So maybe as we wrap this thing up together, you could sort of boil all this down for people and give them a clear direction of what they can do next, or what steps they've ignored for 40 years that need to be taken now.
Awesome. So number one, a couple of the interventions that you mentioned, right? You mentioned like gallbladder flushes or maybe coffee enemas or this thing or that thing may not necessarily be bad, but it's like you have this 500-piece puzzle and I give you one piece and it's like, solve it. Well, I need a little bit more clarity on what the heck's going on for where to put that piece down, right? And I think that's where having the clinician approach to get the diet and lifestyle dialed in, that's always foundational, right? That's the foundational piece. You want to build a big skyscraper or you want to build a small 2-story house, you always start with the foundation first. And again, the higher up you want to go, the deeper that foundation is. That's number one. And we always start with the diet and the lifestyle. So anti-inflammatory, nutrient-dense, low-toxin type of paleo template where the macronutrients can be adjusted and certain foods can be pulled in or out like salicylates, phenols, FODMAPs. Again, we adjust that according to how messed up someone's gut or digestion is. Blood sugar, eating every 4 or 5 hours if possible. If we can't even handle that because eating too much food causes problems, we may have to adjust what we eat. And then the next piece, I think, is I mentioned before getting clarity where that puzzle piece goes. That's where the lab tests really are helpful because they can tell us what's going on deeper, but also it can give the patient a lot of confidence that what they're dealing with is real. Because a lot of people that I've seen, they bump their head up against the wall so many times with doctors that have told them it's not real or it's all in their head, and they don't even know what's fact from fiction. So if we can get clarity on what's real and what's not, and then we can measure it and check back in, that one, it keeps the patient excited. It's like, you're sitting there in your term class, right? In your class throughout the semester, why are you going to study and do your homework if there's no test at the end, right? So the test at the end is the retest or it's the reassessment or it's the follow-up. So people sit in class and pay attention when there's a test. So I like the ability to get a starting point, create the anticipation of, hey, we're going to follow up, and then know there's going to be accountability along the way. So I think working with a practitioner that has those types of foundational pieces in between are really important.
Agreed. I can't tell you any greater feeling than looking at a retest and you find someone that's suffered for 20, 30 years and then you see the infection's gone. It's like, oh, you could take a deep breath when you see stuff like that.
And you see the adrenals start to heal or you see thyroid levels start to get back into balance. So I think those are really important.
What would you say, just in a general sense, if someone just feels like, I've done everything. I've tried the herbs. I've tried the adaptogens. I've had the natural thyroid support, and I've still spun my wheels. How am I supposed to maintain hope? Can I truly get better?
Well, I would say, number one, there may be something missing on the digestive side. So I would say off the bat, look at your nails. Look at your regularity. Look at your bowel movements. Are you a Bristol stool chart number 4? Do your nails look decent? Do you have good digestion without gas and bloating and reflux and irritation? Is that 100% good as well? And let's say it is. We should still get it looked at because if you've done all the body system 1 test, which is what you kind of alluded to, which is like the thyroid, the adrenals, all the supplements to support that, but there are other pieces that really haven't been looked at, or maybe there's symptoms alluding that we should look there, that has to be looked at next. And we really have to do a thorough analysis, maybe even multiple tests side by side to make sure nothing's being missed. Because I can't tell you how many tests I see from other patients coming in where I already know, pardon my French, this lab sucks, right? I'm not going to say the name of it. This lab over here, and we've talked about this before, they run one lab from this crappy lab, and we're like, oh man, that lab stinks. It definitely missed it. And then we don't even run that lab. We run other labs that we consider to be better based on our thousands of data points on it. And we see even the good lab misses one, but the other lab pulls something up. And it's like, wow, if we didn't use really good labs to begin with, and if we didn't use 1 or 2 side by side, we wouldn't even have picked it up. So most patients are already coming in, they're having lab tests that may be subpar on the gut, and they're saying, no, I'm fine. Look, I'm fine, no problem. And it's like, just maybe be a little bit more skeptical if you haven't done the right test and you haven't done multiple tests that I consider to be the good tests, right? And we would say like maybe the 401H and the DRG and the GI map would be some good tests that we put our stamp of approval on, maybe even the one by Doctors Data 2 is a pretty good one. But I'd like to say at least 2 of those, and definitely having the DNA one in there to look at it and really round out our assessment.
Yeah, so I'll add a note to that too. I had a female patient who struggled forever and ever. She went to a conventional doctor who then made the referral to the gastroenterologist, a very common step that they'll make. She got the stool test at the hospital. She showed up with no infection, so she thought, I'm fine. Evan, it's just a yeast problem. Can you help support me for yeast, getting rid of yeast? I was skeptical. I thought, okay, this doesn't make sense. So we ran, when Justin said 401H, that's by a company called BioHealth. We both use and love them.
Yep, they're great.
We ran the 401H, and she still showed up negative. So even I was almost convinced at this point. So I said, okay, well, let's try to knock out the candida. Let's go for another 4 to 6 weeks, see what happens. Bloating, excessive distension was still there. So then we ran the other test that you mentioned, the GI map, which is by a company, in case people are trying to find them. It's Diagnostic Solutions Lab. And she showed up with Dentamoeba, a parasite infection. We finally found it.
Yeah.
So even some of the best tests that you just alluded to, sometimes there will be false negatives, and you're going to need to go and do 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 test panels looking at different things, whether it was stool or urine, et cetera, to actually find something. Because if you have a feeling in your gut that something's not right in your gut,
Pun
your gut
intended.
feeling is probably right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say here's the kicker right now, and this is like, I think this bothers a lot of people, but I just put it out there so they know it in advance. The more you can predict what's going to happen, good or bad, patients have faith in you. So I think it's really important to make sure patients have faith, because they're taking, a lot of what you say to heart. So the big thing is, sometimes when we retest some of these gut infections, we have a new infection. Okay, now there's a couple of variables, a couple of reasons why. Number one, it could be the fact that as the gut heals, proximal to distal, meaning into the middle part of the gut where the food resides versus into the gut wall, right, where everything kind of emanates or goes into, there can be deeper infections that are burrowed in deeper and that may come to the surface as the gut heals. And this is kind of theoretical in functional medicine. It's called the crypt hyperplasia phenomenon. That could potentially be happening. I've seen people with 4 or 5 infections burrowed in deeper, and 1 or 2 comes out at a time.
Wow. So let me kind of restate that, so people are like, what does that mean? So basically what happens is, you'll come in and you'll find an infection, you'll treat that in someone, that original infection's gone, you get the retest, but now a new infection's there, and you're like, what the? So then you come in, you retreat again, that infection's gone, another one shows up. So you are really doing a great job of zooming in and zooming out here, because if people have been struggling with adrenal issues and you're 4 or 5 infections deep, it's going to take a while before you get those adrenal hormones back online. Is that safe to say?
100%. Now, I'm going to give you guys a good visual analogy. So anyone that's listening to the show, go check out Beyond Wellness Radio and watch the YouTube video of this. So imagine I'm going to pull out my spirit fingers. Okay, here they are. They're going. These are like the microvilli in the small intestine, okay? So imagine where my head is, right? This is where the food is, in the central part of the intestinal tract. Here are the microvilli, and then here's the deeper intestinal wall. So maybe you run a stool test, and it's pulling samples more from this area, and then as the gut starts healing, now the stool's starting to grab particles or particulate from this area, so deeper in. So the infections could be burrowed deeper in. So I'm more proximal, and then distal is kind of deeper into the gut lining. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay, I'm going to put my spirit fingers away now.
Good.
So getting back to that, number 1 is the crypt hyperplasia. Number 2 is maybe a spouse or a partner that has an infection and is passing it back and forth. And you guys are playing hot potato. It's like, get rid of my infection, I'll throw it back to you the next week. So that's a potential thing. And things like H. pylori can be spread via saliva, so it's very possible. And that's number 2. And then the next thing could be pets. So like I got Butter over there. Butter loves giving me kisses, and I'm just like, no, you can kiss my hand and I'll wash it later, or I'll give her a kiss on top of her head, where there's not like saliva and a tongue there. So that piece is the pet piece. And then also you have X factors like food, traveling abroad, like me, water skiing over in Lake Austin, getting a mouthful of water like that. I mean, I imagine some of the people down at the Rio Olympics right now that are going on. I've seen some of that nasty water. I mean, I saw something like a teaspoon of that water can make you sick with this nasty bacteria. So water and those type of things, drinking when you're on a hike from a stream, all those things could be potential X factors, I call it. So number 1 is the crypt hyperplasia phenomenon. 2 is partner spouses. 3 can be the X factor, the water and food and such.
So who knows if the Olympic athletes are getting access to functional medicine practitioners, because it sounds like a lot of them are going to be going home with parasites.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. And it's very possible that is the case. And again, you get some people that, we do a round of treatment and they're not better. And then they get discouraged and they don't have the fortitude to go through it again or to retest. And that's the hard part in functional medicine, is knowing that, we'd like to have a home run the first time, but sometimes it doesn't happen. And we have to do 2 or 3 rounds. And that may be the case. Or sometimes we may even have to add a breath test to it as well, because maybe there's just not a major infection there, but there's just a major gut bacteria issue that's driving gases, hydrogen and methane, to higher levels that are disrupting peristalsis and gut motility and such.
Yeah, so this can go deep. As you see, Justin and I could go for hours and hours about this, but I think you've done a great job of summarizing this for people. So the takeaway here, get your adrenals checked if you haven't, and make sure you're doing that with a lab that makes sense, like BioHealth we like. You talked about the Dutch earlier.
Let me hit one more thing too.
Yeah,
so
please
I've
do.
noticed, having doing hundreds of the new Dutch tests. Dutch test is one of the big hot ones out, the dried urine testing hormones. The difference with the Dutch is you can look at the free fraction along with the metabolized hormones as well. So you get kind of the, what's bioavailable and what's totally coming from the adrenals. So you get kind of the big and the small picture. It's like T3 free and T3 total on a blood test. You see what's bioavailable. You see what's actually coming out from the gland. So Dutch is great. I find it projects a little bit high on the cortisol cascader chart, and I find
same.
BioHealth test a little bit low. So when you look at those tests, you have to kind of factor in that BioHealth may be on the lower side if you're doing it, and the Dutch may be on the higher side. And you got to factor those couple of things in. Even though it may say you're low on the BioHealth, you may be okay. Or if it says you're normal on the Dutch, you may actually be high, or even, typically you'd be higher on the Dutch.
Yeah, so I guess that would add in the variable here. The practitioner that you're working with, make sure that they're actually listening to you, because if you're telling them, look, I'm exhausted, but the adrenals show up fine and they don't want to do anything about it, then that practitioner is not listening to you, because we can't treat people as a robot. We can't treat in a vacuum, and we can't just go on labs. There's got to be a combination, and we can't just treat on symptoms either. I've had people who've said that they're completely exhausted. The adrenals show up okay, but then we see that it's a major mitochondrial issue. But if we just tested adrenals, you would have gave them a clean bill of health and moved on. So, really look at the full picture is the takeaway.
Oh, and also I have one little pet peeve. I'm going to hit it up, but there's a couple of people out there that I know that aren't using adrenal testing. And I have colleagues out there say, I think the adrenal testing is invaluable. It's not valuable. It's not worth it, right? I can just base our adrenal program based off of some people's symptoms. Right. Now, I totally disagree with that. Now, here's the reason why. Number one, I've run adrenal tests on people where you're like, oh my God, like they have all these adrenal symptoms and the adrenals come back looking great. And then we run the thyroid and the organic acid testing and their mitochondria is shot and their thyroid's low. Now, if I would have went into it thinking, wow, this person has to have an adrenal issue, they didn't. So you see how important it is? You can be chasing your tail if you don't know that. And also, maybe their adrenals are good, but their maybe their adrenals are in the middle, but their DHEA is super low. So now we know, maybe their adrenals are worse than they are because the DHEA output, which becomes the precursor to the sex hormones, is really fatigued, is really depressed. So that may tell us there may be a deeper adrenal issue, even though the cortisol stuff, the cortisol rhythm may be fine. And again, the rhythm is going to be where you're getting the answers regarding energy. Oh, you higher energy in the morning, lower energy at night. So you may see that more with the rhythm. The DHEA, you may not be able to extrapolate that from those symptoms. So that's my issue with people not running these tests and just basing it off of symptoms. I think it's a big mistake.
Well said. And it's not that you're going to necessarily get sick. We're not talking about playing with chemo drugs or anything here. But if you're investing your money and you want to get healthy and you're not getting healthy because you just got guessed, now you're playing guess and check, well, your supplement graveyard's going to get pretty big if you do that method.
Plus, it's really nice to have a pre and post test to look at.
Agreed.
Yep. So I like that.
Agreed. Well, cool. Well, any last words of wisdom for people, and then we'll send them back to your website, justinhealth.com, where they can learn more about you. They can sign up for consultations if they want to work with you. And you got videos, you got podcasts, all sorts of free content, thyroid videos, hormone videos, etc.
Well, I'd say off the bat, number one, do all the foundational stuff. I mean, myself and Evan, we have great podcasts and great information out there. It's totally free that people can listen to it and basically get access to our brains and our info, the things that we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to learn over the last decade. It's right at your fingertips for free. So most of that you can already access it. So start with that information off the bat. Number two, if you've already tried some stuff and you bang your head against the wall, remember, if you're trying to get better and you've already done the foundational stuff and you're not getting better, if you don't make a decision to start seeing a good functional medicine practitioner out, you end up paying twice. Because you pay, number one, with the quality of your health, which starts to get worse over time. And then number two, as it gets worse, it becomes more expensive and more timely and costly to fix it. So if you've already done the foundational piece, which you can access a lot of that information free from Justin Health on YouTube and podcasts at Beyond Wellness Radio, and then not just paleo, if you're doing all that, then the next step is you want to reach out to a really good trained functional medicine physician or nutritionist or diagnostician to get the next steps lined up.
Well said. And I'll lastly add on the part of wasting your money. If you have a gut infection, it doesn't matter if you're buying organic grass-fed beef. If you're not digesting it, you're not getting those amino acids that are fueling your hormones, your brain, what's the use?
100%. And again, who goes and climbs Mount Everest and doesn't hire the Sherpa that's gone to the top 50 or 100 times, right? You want that Sherpa that's been to the top 100 times to lead your way, right?
Yeah.
Right. In the Mount Everest analogy. So most people, they're saying, yeah, I can climb Everest on my own, even though I haven't done it yet. And it's kind of treacherous, meaning it can be expensive and timely and costly if you make the wrong move, right? You won't die probably, right? It's not like Mount Everest, but you'll suffer. And may not just be on the health side, it may just be financially with choosing the wrong supplements and getting that supplement graveyard, like you said, right?
Yeah. And if you read books and hear podcasts on climbing Everest, I don't think it's going to mount up to the same thing as having that Sherpa there.
I 100% agree. You got it.
Well, cool. Well, take care. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it as always.
Evan, it's been real as always, my friend. Thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to BeyondWellnessRadio.com and click the questions button. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, click below to review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to BeyondWellnessRadio.com.